Clearly, as you can see, I am in a very super mood. Is that reversed? I can't really. You get the idea. I'm excited for DC. I'm excited for where the DCU is going and where James Gunn is going to take us in terms of the characters of Batman, Wonder Woman, Flash, Green Lantern, but most notably, Superman. Honestly, this movie looks so good that I just want to see it already. I think David Cornsweet's going to do a great job as Superman. I really enjoyed Creature Commandos. I really enjoyed the Suicide Squad and Peacemaker. I think DC is on its way to the status that I and so many other fans have been wanting, praying to see at some point. And while fans can only wait for the real stuff to happen, of course we're gonna imagine, of course we're gonna fantasize of what we would want to see with these characters. And as someone who has delved into the world of film and writing, and most notably fan fiction, I want to tell you my story, my saga for DC. If I were in charge, how would I approach these characters? I like a lot of what James Gunn is doing and what he's announced and the attitude he's bringing to DC. But I want to tell you guys what I think would work as well. Reinventing the DCU Phase 1 has begun. So this Phase 1 would ultimately do what Marvel did with their Phase 1 of the MCU, which, by the way, I don't even necessarily think is copying or stealing or unoriginal. I think it is the template to follow for a successful cinematic universe and franchise ultimately. And the argument could be made that what Bruce Timm and DC did with Batman the Animated Series, Justice League, Superman, set the template, aside from the comics themselves. These stories would follow the same type of method of ultimately leading up to the collaborative film, which would be the Justice League. We would start with a Superman film to essentially establish this character as the leading figure of this universe. We would follow with the Flash to kind of give us the fun levity and everything, to give us another side of the DCU. We would get mythical with Wonder Woman. We would follow with a Green Lantern story afterwards to establish what space would look like in this world. We would stay in the cosmic realm with the Supergirl film. We would have a Batman story to ground ourselves back into the world of DC. And ultimately, those stories would lead into a Justice League film. These videos are going to come out in that sequence, pretty much. And then, who knows, maybe we'll do a compilation video. It's going to be a lot of work, but I promise you it's going to be really fun. So, to start off, we have to talk about the main character, the Tony Stark of this universe, if you will. This man right here. Superman is the linchpin of this universe, of DC in general. I love Superman, I love his characters, and for a long time I've been waiting for a story that would fulfill what's been missing since the Christopher Reeve era, personally. I appreciate a lot of what Cavill's take was, but even Cavill, I think, wanted to get a characterization of this character that was more in line with what the comics have to offer, as well as previous iterations, where he is a hopeful figure. He is someone who is an optimist at heart. And that's why I'm really looking forward to James Gunn's take. It looks great so far. So the first story of Phase 1 would be Superman Golden Age. This is a world where heroes have been known. Heroes are more like rumors. And this figure has been known only as a local legend in Smallville, Kansas for about 10-15 years. In Smallville, things only happen but to a local degree. Crimes such as like the local bank robbery, cats and trees. In Smallville, the crime or the crisis, it's small potatoes. And the local legend, the local hero that has been seen but not really met, is Smallville's very own Superboy. Someone who's only been partially seen in a red and blue type of costume. We know that he's of a good build, and whenever people meet him in Smallville, he has a cheery, upbeat attitude. People really respond to Superboy. And the person who has been telling the story, reporting on the good deeds of Superboy, has been the local reporter for the Smallville Gazette, Clark Kent. Clark has lived with the Kents for all his life. Clark's a well-respected, kind of timid, nebbish character in Smallville that people like, but people don't really know. He's very closed off to the vest and everything. People note him as a writer, and a very gifted writer. Gifted to the point that he is offered a scholarship in the big city of Metropolis. And he's actually landed an internship writing for the Daily Planet. And before he goes off into the big city, he has to say goodbye to his loved ones in Smallville. His friends like Pete Ross and his crushes like Lana Lang, his mother Martha and his father Jonathan. And those two are the bedrock of his morality. The people who love him no matter what and are sad to see him go, but proud of him for making the next step. They've heard a lot of different things about Metropolis. They've heard that it is kind of a dirty town. It's only one step above a place like Gotham. And there are a lot of oddballs there, a lot of colorful people like Superboy over there. But Clark, being the upbeat person that he is, naive in his own way, thinks he can take on anyone and everything. And arriving at Metropolis, he is very overwhelmed by the size and scope of what Metropolis has. He has problems hearing everything since he's part Kryptonian, and he's familiar with his powers, but he's not invested in his powers. He hasn't traveled up north. He doesn't have a Fortress of Solitude yet. He knows that he's from another world at this point, but the only training with his powers that he's had is based on what he learned with his parents in the backyard. He's in the costume that his mother lovingly made for him. Whenever he goes to stop crimes of any sort, he's met by people who are kind of cynical, who kind of make fun of him after he goes out of his way to save him. It's kind of a weird juxtaposition of him doing the right thing versus people who are kind of ungrateful. And that's kind of what Metropolis is right now. Metropolis is a city without hope, kind of run by corporations, run by billionaires. And it's filled with people who are kind of beaten down by the capitalistic grind set. So Superboy is doing what he can, making the rounds. And on Clark's first day at the Daily Planet, he still feels like a fish out of water. It's a very kind of depressing newspaper. Newspapers are dying. Newspapers aren't what they used to be back in the 40s, the 70s, or even the 90s. Everything is going electronic. People aren't willing to pay $5 a month or whatever to get a piece of paper learning about how the world sucks. And Clark, being nebbish once again, not as an act, but literally just because of who he is, he's intimidated by the kind of cynicism that he's being thrust into. He tries working his way up and he meets the editor-in-chief, Perry White, who is a guy who remembers Metropolis as the thriving city before corporations like Stag Industries or LexCorp came into town. He remembers why people moved to Metropolis. It was to make it. It was to make a brighter tomorrow. And he sees a lot of himself in Clark when he was his age. The optimist, someone who is willing to do the work to make that better tomorrow. And he warns Clark that, hey, don't put that much effort into it because you're gonna end up like me, beaten down. Clark really feels at odds and everything. He's even considering leaving Metropolis, going back to Smallville, where it is kind of idealistic, where it is almost naive. But that is until he meets his competition, the person who lights the fire under his ass, under his caped ass, Lois Lane.
Nice S.
Excuse me?
Right here.
Ace journalist at the Daily Planet. And Lois is very cynical. Lois is someone who knows the streets of Metropolis, knows the alleys of Metropolis, knows the people of Metropolis, and has to carry that vibe, in her opinion, to survive. She writes honestly, she writes from the heart, but what's in her heart is just a lot of negativity. She focuses on almost the social justice of Metropolis, trying to expose corporations to show the people who aren't reading how boned they really are. And something about this kind of draws Clark. Clark is interested in learning more about her. He tries to talk to her. He's very nebbish and very shy. He's never met a woman like Lois before. And Lois thinks he's cute for a farm guy who comes from the small town. Very much an underdog. She finds somewhat attractive. Not that she would admit that to Clark. And in a joking way, but not a really joking way, she tells Clark that he's gonna leave by the end of the month. He's not gonna wanna stay because the pressure is gonna be too much for him and he's not gonna like the way he feels after every day of reporting in a city like Metropolis. And Clark is starting to get the hang of it. He's starting to figure himself out. And he says, you know what? I'm gonna make it my mission to prove this woman wrong. If Lois Lane represents what Metropolis currently is, I can represent what it can be. So Superboy starts making the rounds in Metropolis again, and he's fighting a lot of colorful criminals, a lot of colorful would-be villains and everything. And through this process, Clark meets a very specific figure at the Daily Planet who is as chipper as him somehow, which is why they become good friends. It's Jimmy Olsen, who tags along with Clark as his photographer. He tried working with Lois, but Lois and him were too different. Jimmy's optimism kind of annoyed Lois, and Lois's negativity was too much for Jimmy to handle. He felt like he was bothering her a lot of the time because he kind of was. So the two kind of build their friendship from here, learning about each other's history and what they want out of this town and what they want out of this job. And they just genuinely get along with each other. So at this point, it becomes a race between Lois and Jimmy and Clark of who is going to report best on Superboy. Now, the way that Clark is reporting on Superboy is very positive, like, hey, guess what? There's this new guy in town who's kind of taking action, taking charge and everything. And Jimmy doesn't know that Clark is Superboy at this point. He's just taking the photos, they're getting tips anonymously, and Clark and him are going to the action. And you would imagine that they have the one-up on Lois, but Lois knows Metropolis better. She knows the people. She takes note of the types of situations and people that inserts himself into and saves. It makes him predictable. She's keeping up with the two, and she's writing the better articles because, frankly, she's the better writer between Clark and her. The issue is that she is reporting on Superboy in a cynical way, reporting on him as some fuddy-duddy, some naive kid who doesn't know what he's getting himself into, and is entering a never-ending battle for what? For what purpose? Stopping a group of bank robbers isn't going to take care of the real systemic issues that Metropolis faces. The systematic change that is required for the people of Metropolis to really thrive is not being met. Clark is really challenged because although he doesn't agree with the cynicism, she's making good points. This kind of drives Clark to do other things than just action pieces. Superboy is starting to give to charities, help firefighters, help crossing guards from Metropolis Elementary. He's getting to know the people more, and slowly the people are starting to get brighter, especially the kids. The kids actually have something to look up to. This figure, this local hero, is starting to make some kind of difference. And through this process, Clark, Jimmy, Lois start to get to know each other a little bit better. Their characters are being a bit more defined at this point. Through this montage, this sequence, we get to see a lot of figures from Superman's lore. We can see characters like the Kite Man, we can see characters like Parasite, but there have been rumors not only amongst the police department or the people of Metropolis, but even in the Daily Planet, that there is a new kind of threat brewing in Metropolis. And this threat is another colorful kind of figure that Superboy wants to apprehend, wants to find. This colorful threat uses weird things to cause terror in Metropolis, such as toys. And he causes a lot of havoc that Lois reports on and nicknames this unknown figure as the Toy Man. And Team Clark and Team Lois go through Metropolis through their connections to find more information on this Toy Man. Lois goes through one of her connections in the police department, Detective Dan Turpin, finding out information about who this person could be. Jimmy introduces Clark to a figure who hangs out near the docks named Bippo, this kind of strong guy who's like, you know, kind of slow, but ultimately well-intentioned and has a great heart. And both teams are led to the same spot, where the most activity has kind of been known throughout the underground of Metropolis. Both teams meet up, unknowingly meet up, at an abandoned missile silo in between Metropolis and Keystone City. And that missile silo serves as the lair of the Toy Man. It's even dressed up to be this like chaotic, disgusting toy store where pictures of the Toy Man's victims are hung up. Even some of their corpses are like encased in these boxes that are like fit for action figures. It's like a collector's insane psychotic wet dream. And it's there where they find the Toy Man himself. It's this guy who goes by Winslow Shot. And this guy is truly disturbed. He's psychotic. He went to Metropolis University for engineering, majored in that. He's known as an engineering genius, but every type of job he applied for, whether it be at Ferris Airways or at Star Labs, he always failed the psychological profile. This dude is a true psychopath. He considers life as a game with winners and losers. For so long, he's considered himself a loser and wanted to flip the script. He always had this fascination with toys and games and quantified the realities of life in that way. He looks at his victims from his traps and his toys as losers. He looks at someone like Superboy as a winner. And it's at this point that the Toy Man reveals his biggest toy yet, which is a giant freaking robot. Think the Iron Giant, but evil. And this giant is made from stolen Argus technology that Winslow somehow got his hands on. And this technology that was originally developed in the 60s was powered by nuclear radiation. So if it were ever taken, it would have been tracked by the government, by Argus themselves. But when Winslow got his hands on the technology, he found a different element to power it. An unknown element, something that's not even on the periodic table. All that Winslow knows is that it's very bright, and it's very green, and it's crystallized. And when Superboy, who shows up out of nowhere, Clark disappears and Superboy shows up, I wonder who it is. When Superboy shows up and takes on the robot, he's beaten because he's exposed to the radiation caused by this element. And it's during this fight that Lois puts two and two together. Clark Kent is Superboy. And Jimmy is mind blown because he's innocent. He can't believe it. Thankfully, Winslow doesn't really care about who Superboy is, so even if he knows or doesn't know, it's not going to make much of a difference. And beaten with the costume that his mother made for him, torn, completely ready to give up, and the robot breaks out of the missile silo, making his way to Metropolis. Winslow laughs, saying that the game is almost over, and the person to knock him out is Jimmy. Jimmy's the one who calls the cops and puts him away. And at his lowest point, Clark tells Lois that she's right. She's always been right. Metropolis is going to burn because of him. It's going to be destroyed because of him. He couldn't make an actual difference that this city needed. And Lois, at this point, seeing a hero on his knees, her friend, she says, "Clark, you're exactly what Metropolis needs right now." And this optimism lifts Clark up. His spirits are raised to 11. And the trio rushes over to Metropolis and find that it's already havoc. The military is there trying to take down this robot, but they're having trouble. And before Clark can do anything, they have to figure out how to take this thing down. It was because of that odd green element that the robot was able to beat him, so they need to figure out a way for him to win this time. And it's at that point that Clark uses his X-ray vision on the material that the outer shell of the robot is made of. It's lead. Infused with steel, but ultimately lead. And when Clark was near the robot when the radiation wasn't exposed, he was okay. So from the rubble of the broken buildings in Metropolis, Clark gets as much lead as he can and puts together a makeshift suit, carving that beautiful S on his chest. And he goes armored up, flying in the sky, the people of Metropolis below seeing it. And you hear from the crowd, it's a bird, it's a plane. And Lois enters saying, no, it's Superman. Jimmy looks to her like, what? Lois says, that fits better. And Superman fights the robot. He saves people in the process. Jimmy gets photos of the whole action and everything. Lois is reporting from her phone, introducing this man of tomorrow, introducing the world to this new golden age of heroism. And finally, Superman takes down the robot. And the people below cheer, chanting, Superman, Superman, Superman. Superman smiles at Lois before flying off into space with the robot, tossing him into the sun. And he basks in the glow, basks in the light. This is his age. This is his moment. The following days, Winslow is interrogated by Detective Dan Turpin. Dan wants to know how someone like the Toy Man could have gotten his hands on Argus technology. And the Toy Man sneers, he chuckles, he laughs at the detective, saying that brilliance will only take you so far. You can't play the game unless you have other players to join you. Someone helped the Toy Man get that technology. In fact, someone created a lot of the crazy people, a lot of the colorful figures that Superman has taken down, almost as if they were researching, experimenting the new guy in town. But before Winslow can say anything else, something happens where he stops talking. It's revealed that Winslow has a little chip inside his head, inside his brain, that has an explosive device in it, and he's killed by the device. Toyman is assassinated by an unknown assailant. The following days, the Daily Planet's headline, Superman Saves the Day, written by Lois Lane and Clark Kent. Photos by Jimmy Olsen. Everybody buys this paper. A new tone is being established in Metropolis. People are starting to look up. People are starting to believe in Metropolis more. People are taking pride in their city. And people, after the Battle of Metropolis, take part in the cleanup. Superman is there with them, helping with the cleanup, smiling at them, ensuring that everyone's going to be safe, helping those afflicted by the havoc. And when I say everyone has this paper, I mean everyone has this paper. Even Clark's parents back in Smallville. They call him to say, hey, we're so freaking proud of you. When are you coming home? Clark tells him, hey, I am home. And since they're victorious, Jimmy suggests that they go celebrate, get a drink somewhere. But it's at that moment that Clark hears someone in distress. And up and away he goes, helping out. Like this, actually. Afterward, in the high tower of Metropolis, looking down on the city below, witnessing Superman flying off into the distance, is the billionaire philanthropist, Lex Luthor, who's accompanied by his assistant, Mercy, who comes with that sample he requested that was found at the Battle of Metropolis. He picks up a sliver of the crystal, chuckling, looking at it. This specimen requires further study, maybe even testing. And that's Superman Golden Age. So yeah, this would be the first part in the first phase of the DCU. What did you guys think? Are you interested? Are you excited for Superman by James Gunn like I am? I'm gonna be wearing these rags to the premiere. And stay tuned because what's next is The Flash. Have a good one, stay safe, and goodbye.